Imagine a mother who did everything she could to protect the honor of her children, even camping for months beside their bodies. We're talking about Rizpah, a concubine of King Saul of Israel. Rizpah's story became known in the Bible precisely because of her dedication to protecting the bodies of her deceased sons. Rizpah was an Ayahite, a descendant of Ayah, meaning she was a foreign woman. The biblical text mentions that Rizpah was the mother of at least 2 sons, Armani and Mephibosheth. It's important to clarify that this Mephibosheth, Rizpah's son, should not be confused with the Mephibosheth who was the son of Jonathan. In this video, you'll learn everything the Bible says about who Rizpah was and understand why her story was marked by tragedy. To understand who Rizpah was, we first need to know a bit about the environment in which she lived, a context full of intrigues, conspiracies, and shifts in power. After King Saul's death, his son Ishbosheth was declared king over the tribes of Israel except for the tribe of Judah, which at that time already recognized David's leadership. Therefore, Ishbosheth essentially reigned over the northern tribes, while David ruled over the tribe of Judah. Again, it's important to distinguish Ishbosheth from Mephibosheth. Ishbosheth was Saul's legitimate surviving son. Mephibosheth, as mentioned, was one of the sons of Rizpah, Saul's concubine, and therefore Ishbosheth's half-brother. Of course, Mephibosheth was also the name of one of Saul's grandsons, the crippled son of Jonathan. This was a time of great instability, marked by a prolonged war between the house of Saul and the house of David. During this period, a warrior named Abner, the commander of Israel's army under the house of Saul, gained significant power and prestige. However, at one point, Ishbosheth accused Abner of having a relationship with Rizpah, leading to a fatal discord between them. But why was it a problem for Abner and Rizpah to have a relationship? The issue was that Rizpah had been a concubine of the king. By concluding that Abner had been involved with Rizpah, Ishbosheth was essentially accusing Abner of treason. This accusation wasn't born out of simple jealousy over a supposed relationship between Abner and Rizpah, but from fear that the relationship was part of Abner's strategy to claim the throne of Israel. Do you remember, I mentioned that Abner had become very powerful in Israel during that time? It was Ishbosheth's fear. In antiquity, there were many instances of army commanders who became kings of nations through conspiracies involving relationships with women of the court. This disagreement between Abner and Ishbosheth ended up benefiting King David. Offended by the accusation, Abner began to support David as king. As a result, without Abner's protection, Ishbosheth quickly fell, and David finally rose as the king of a unified kingdom in Israel. However, time passed, and the kingdom of Israel was struck by a great drought that lasted 3 years. This drought caused a famine that brought challenges to David's reign, as recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 21. King David sought the Lord to understand the reason for the drought afflicting the land. The Lord's response to David was that the drought was a result of Saul's betrayal of the Gibeonites. To understand this issue, we need to go back a bit in history. When the Israelites were conquering Canaan during Joshua's time, a type of protection agreement was made with the Gibeonites. This meant that Israel had promised to protect the Gibeonites, but Saul launched a military campaign that persecuted and killed many of them. For those who may not know, the Gibeonites were not part of the children of Israel, but were a remnant of the Amorites whom Israel had sworn to spare. Therefore, David summoned the Gibeonites and asked what could be done to make amends for the wrongdoing. The Gibeonites replied that they wanted neither gold nor silver from Israel, nor to kill any Israelite, but instead wanted Saul's descendants to pay for the crime. They requested that David hand over 7 of Saul's descendants so they could execute them. David agreed to their request and promised to deliver 7 men from Saul's house. It was in the midst of this ethnic conflict that Rizpah's tragic story unfolded. Among the men handed over to the Gibeonites by David were Rizpah's 2 sons, Armani and Mephibosheth, as well as the 5 sons of Merab, Saul's daughter. Since David had promised to protect the lineage of Jonathan, his friend, he spared Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan and grandson of Saul. However, he handed over Rizpah's 2 sons, who were Saul's concubine's children, to die alongside Saul's other grandchildren through his daughter Merab. The Bible states that the Gibeonites took these men and hanged them on a hill before the Lord. This happened at the beginning of the barley harvest, around the equivalent of April in the year. In this tragic context, the Bible describes how, when Rizpah's sons were hanged, she took a coarse cloth and set up a shelter on a rock near the location where the bodies of those men were left exposed. Rizpah stood guard over her sons' bodies, preventing them from being eaten by birds of prey during the day and by wild animals at night. At that time, it was considered a great dishonor for the bodies of the dead to become food for birds of the air or animals of the field. Leaving a body unburied was a way of disgracing the deceased, as stated in Deuteronomy 28:26. Rizpah, however, tirelessly protected the bodies of her sons day and night until they could be buried. This was not a short-term effort. Rizpah guarded her sons' bodies from the beginning of the harvest until the onset of autumn rains in the northern hemisphere, a period of nearly 6 months. It is likely that David allowed the bodies to remain exposed during this time, awaiting some evidence that Saul's crime against the Gibeonites had been atoned for and that God's blessing had returned to Israel. However, King David eventually heard about Rizpah's dedication to protecting her sons' bodies. At this point, the biblical text implies that David ordered the remains of the men to be collected. Just as Saul and Jonathan's bones were retrieved from the residence of Jabesh Gilead, the bones of these men were buried honorably in Saul's family tomb. Interestingly, up to this point, the Bible states that the Lord's attitude toward the land of Israel had not changed, meaning the famine still persisted. But after the bodies were buried, the biblical writer notes that God became favorable toward the land, signifying that the crisis had ended. Now I want to know, did you already know Rizpah's story in the Bible? Yes or no? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching the video. May God bless you and your family. Take the opportunity to watch the other videos on the channel. See you next time.